break. We will start just momentarily. We know people are waiting online to join us, so just give us a minute and we will be resuming. You fine to go? Okay. Waiting. Colleagues, friends, we will now continue with item 11. And item 11 is the work stream on comprehensive risk management. And as the previous two, now I'm going to hand over to one of the champions on comprehensive risk management, Shara, to facilitate this session. And once we have covered item 11 here, we will then come back to you and suggest a way forward for the remaining part of the afternoon and how we make good use of the time there to address some of the business from this morning, including on technical guides and the 10-year anniversary commemoration. So with this, Shara, over to you.
Thank you, Frode. And perhaps I will just start by saying I'm going to keep my remarks quite short. And also we'll have a slightly different format where I will also invite some of our experts to chime in relatively early to provide updates as well. And I'll just say that for the TAG CRM, they adopted a new plan of action late last year that was endorsed in Sharm el-Sheikh. And so we're very excited to begin work on that new plan of action. But we also have a set of relatively new members for the TAG CRM Champions Group, including myself, when I volunteered last ExCom meeting in September, and we have not since had a meeting of the TAG CRM. And we also have two new champions that volunteered at the beginning of this meeting to fill the shoes or the places that were left empty by Nadal and Leanne. So we have a new champions group that is very much looking forward to engaging and taking forward the work this spring and this year, but also for the reasons that I just explained, we don't have many substantive updates in terms of exactly where we are, and would hope to have the experts share some of the work they are related to the plan of action. That being said, I did want to flag for the broader ExCom that it would be helpful to have some more guidance related to some of the technical products and knowledge products that are in the plan of action that I know are already underway. And I think I flagged that earlier this morning in the cross-cutting section, but just that having guidance around when these groups should submit an outline for our review, as well as the nature of that outline, and then the overall process for having a technical guide or technical product fully improved and endorsed by the ExCom as well. So I think some more clarity around that process would be helpful for our expert group. So hopefully we can take up that conversation when we have our breakouts related to technical guides. So enough from me. I'll pause there and I will ask if there are experts either here in the room or online that would like to share some of the work they are doing related to the plan of action activities. Thank you, Animesh, UNDRR.
Thanks, Sierra. So out of the 10 activities or outputs that were agreed upon in our work plan for Tech CRM, we were involved or co-leading with other experts on 3. So let me update on those 3 activities. First one was, as usual, technical guidance. And I would want to reiterate what I mentioned in the morning, that the comprehensive risk assessment and planning guidelines that we had developed as part of this Tech CRM output last year from the previous work plan is already published last year and is on our website. We would request this to be uploaded on the UNFCCC website as agreed in the ExCom work plan. As part of the new work plan, we are developing a new guide which looks into better application of climate information for short to medium term actions, including on averting, minimizing, addressing loss and damage, disaster risk reduction, and short-term adaptation. This technical guidance is in advanced stage and we'll be soon sharing with the Tech CRM members for their feedback and inputs. It's internally, we have already gone through a process, so it looks fairly solid. And we have collaborated very closely with WMO in developing that guidance, who are also our co-lead for this activity. One of the key things I want to highlight is that also building on the discussion on technical guidance we have had through the day and will have in the latter half of the day, is that technical guidance are useful only when they are applied. And which means that the technical guidances need to have some form of a programmatic landing spot, not just target audience, but a target activity. So our guidelines that we have been developing are meant for our program called Comprehensive Risk Management, through which we are providing technical assistance to around 20 plus developing vulnerable countries across the world on integrated planning, bringing together concepts and practices of adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and AMA loss and damage together in the form of an integrated plan. And this is also linked with the Risk-Informed Early Action Partnership, REAP, Target 1, and the Adaptation Action Coalition's DRR workstream, both of which are led and co-led by UNDRR. So we're bringing together these guidance to be applied in different programmatic contexts. So that's the first activity. The second activity was to develop a leadership module on comprehensive risk management, and the idea was to unpack the concept and practice of CRM at a senior level in the government, in the international fraternity, international organizations, and to make a very simple case for why bringing together and synergizing different approaches is important to the success of AMA loss and damage. For this, we have already signed a grant agreement with the UN System Staff College because they're very well placed to develop such kind of capacity building modules. And thankfully, luckily, the Sustainable Development Division responsible for this work is based in Bonn, in the same building as us. This work is ongoing, and we have already made a list of members and other parties who we would target to interview to develop this module. I already have Philippines on my list, but some ExCom members as well would also be contacted so that we can get some of your views which will help firm up that module. And the third and final activity is on evidence-based tracking system for loss and damage. So we know that UNDRR, together with other partners, including UNDP, developed a system for tracking loss and damage long time back in 1994. In the last 25 years, 110 countries have adopted that system and are using it for tracking their losses and damages, and majorly disaster impacts. And we understand that this is not capturing the full spectrum of loss and damage as we see it in this group, and hence we are enhancing it in the form of a new system, which is what this output is about. So this new output, the new system, will capture both hazards as well as their cascading impacts, both in terms of ecological, economic, and also non-economic losses, a term I still have my reservations on. We should not call it non-economic losses because they are invaluable losses. But in context of this Paris Agreement word, we will use non-economic losses. But so far we have organized a big, interesting event 2 weeks after the COP27 in Bonn, which was the Technical Expert Forum on Loss and Damage Tracking. We were very fortunate to have the presence of 50 governments across the world with their meteorological offices and disaster management offices coming together to share their current practices and challenges together with international experts. Um, since then, we have already kickstarted the work on development of the prototype of the new system. The prototype will be ready by mid of this year. In the first week of May, we will organize an event in Bonn with the same group of people to share the prototype based on their feedback and then get their final set of feedback. And then we start the new system design. We believe the new system should be ready by COP28 to be launched, if we are lucky and logistics are with us by then. So it will be launched in a modular way, so we will have different versions of it launched over the time to come. And in a stepwise manner, in the first step, these 110 countries that already have the current system will be transitioned to the new system right away. So we already have the new system ready for 110 countries with the current data. The second step would be to get better methodological understanding on slow onset events, non-economic losses, challenges that we have discussed earlier, what Alvin was also mentioning for the non-economic losses for ecosystem services and so on. We will try to configure all of them into the new system, and that's where the event on slow onset event will also be part of that process. And we would be very much willing to hear from ExCom members in terms of the basic minimum feature that we feel are required in this new system and the desirable features which, based on technical ability of the system, will try to integrate. I'm making it a very big emphasis on this point because these systems have a long shelf life. The last system that was developed lasted 25 years. The new system which we will develop now may not last 25 years, but say 15, 20 years. So let's design a system which is universally applicable to the extent possible, and 110 governments using it already is a good indication. And this data is then used for various SDG reporting processes. For example, 155 countries are currently reporting on SDG and Sendai framework monitoring, some of which data is coming from here. So I'll stop with that, but that's a bit of an update on Tech CRM plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very rich intervention, Animesh, and thank you so much for all of the work that UNDRR is doing to advance the plan of action. It's great to hear that so much progress has, in fact, been made. And I agree with your point about non-economic losses. I think I've heard others say it should be called human and ecological losses, which is also a nice way of thinking about it. I wonder if there's any other experts in the room that would like to share some of the work they're doing or online. I don't know if Mary Friel from IFRC is on yet. I know she was planning to provide an update, but may be planning to join when this was on the calendar in a couple hours. But Mary, if you are online, welcome you to share your update. All right, not seeing Mary. I did also just want to briefly update, as I mentioned, for the activity related to loss and damage in national adaptation plans and disaster risk reductions strategies. There is work that has gotten started to analyze NAPs and to consider the content related to loss and damage. That work is being taken forward by ISD, where they have already developed a methodology to review national adaptation plans and conducted somewhat of a literature review to inform that methodology, and are planning to begin the process of reviewing and analyzing the NAPs to prepare the briefing notes and policy paper before the June SBs. And so I think it would also be helpful for us to see if there's any guidance we would like to provide to them, particularly when we would like to see the outline and the process for reviewing that. And I don't know if Gemma is on, but she has also been involved in that work from her capacity in the UK government. So Gemma, if you're on and would like to share any additional thoughts, please feel free to. All right, not having Gemma jumping to join in, feel free to jump in, to come in when you would like. Gemma, sorry, we were having issues, but over to you.
Wanted to note that the work that IASD are carrying out in relation to NAPS, it's with a grant from the UK, and because of financial timing, the bulk work will be by the end of March. So any reflections from the ExCom would be useful to feed in the next, I guess, couple of weeks to be most useful. Thank you.
For those that may not have been able to hear, she said the grant supporting the work of the IISD from FCDO is ending at the end of March. So they have a relatively accelerated timeline. So with that, I'll just open the floor up for views from other champions of the TAG CRM and other members of the ExCom. Yes, Hafij.
Thank you, Sierra. Just I'm seeking a clarification. In TAG CRM, is there any member from CBD Secretariat or CBD expertise? Why I'm telling this, for me, is very important. And UNDRR, they are really expert on the sudden onset events and relevant loss and damage. But I think CBD regime is quite important to understand the loss of ecosystems and biodiversity. And CBD regime is quite rich. They developed different tools and methodologies to related to potential risk and how to assess the loss of biodiversity and ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you for that reflection, Hafij. We do not have a member from CBD, so to answer that question correctly. And I see Kaisa.
Sarah, and thank you to Animesh and UNDRR for the update. I'm hearing the echo again. I hope you can hear me in the room. I just wanted to come in and congratulate TAG CRM on all the work that's going on. I think there's a lot of great work being undertaken. I want to echo one of the points that we have discussed before in the ExCom and that Animesh also pointed to now, and it is that this guidance provided by the UNDRR as a part of the plan of action of the TAG CRM as a sort of technical guide, it should be made public on the UNFCCC website. I think there's, at least I get a lot of questions about where to find that and how to, and it would be good to be able to direct people to the WIM landing page on the UNFCCC website or the TAG CRM page for that, because I do think it's a very valuable resource that many want to find, and it's good to have it easily accessible. I know it's available on the UNDRR website, but I think we should have it as well on our WIM ExCom website. And then I also wanted to flag in relation to what you were talking about on NAPS, that we do have a technical guide on integrating human mobility aspects into relevant national climate change planning processes such as NAPS. So I think we could very much benefit from kind of the desk works that's being undertaken now on national adaptation plans in the progressing of that technical guide. So I think that's a clear area where we can have a synergy. Perhaps we won't develop similar products, but we can draw on the work that you are already undertaking in your group. And then I think you mentioned something in the beginning as well, Sierra, which I think would be a good to come back to in our discussions later. Things that are produced within an expert group by the experts in the expert group, and how that relates to products that are prepared kind of jointly by the expert groups, and when does the ExCom need to endorse a product produced by the expert group. and when does it not have to do that. I think for the technical guides, we have quite a clear process, but I think it still might be useful to discuss that amongst ExCom during the course of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaisa, for those reflections. And I think your point about including the UNDRR materials on the website is useful, and I'll note that there is in the 5-year rolling work plan an activity related to helping communicate and provide outreach for that product. And so that would be an easy way to begin work there. And then also related to the process for other non-technical guide products. I know IISD is quite keen to actually have their product endorsed by the ExCom and branded as an ExCom product along with them. And so I do think it would be helpful to provide guidance if we would like to do that, and also what that would entail in practical terms. Angela, I don't know if you knocked over your flag in an effort to raise it or just knocked, okay. In that case, I see the Philippines.
Good afternoon again, colleagues, members of the ExCom. The Philippines acknowledges the work of the ExCom on its comprehensive work plan on climate risk management, which systematically organizes and prioritizes the response actions of country parties. The Philippines emphasizes the crucial application of systematic approaches in addressing the evolving nature of climate hazard, matching with the stages of risk manifestation and corresponding management of its unfolding impacts. Therefore, the Philippines welcomes the focused attention of the WIM to such impact management strategy for potential actual climate hazards and impacts. The Philippines notes the second plan of action of the Technical Expert Group on Comprehensive Risk Management for the period October 2022 to 2024 and thanks the ExCom for their hard work. Allow us, colleagues and members of the ExCom, to make the following observations and recommendations toward efficient and more effective climate hazard impact management. First, on frontiers and emerging issues. UNFCCC must have its own work plan on CRM based on country party needs and standard typologies and practices on classes of CRM actions, such as risk prevention, risk reduction, addressing residual impacts of fully materialized risks, such as disasters. Second, on development of application of CRM approaches to risk-informed planning and implementation. This should be systematically organized according to risk prevention, reduction, and addressing residual impacts of materialized risks. And finally, on climate risk assessment and climate services and humanitarian perspective on climate risk. Work on these two work streams can be combined, cross-referencing with issuances and work of UNDRR on specific approaches to risk management. Such work may use as guidance of country parties in comprehensive risk assessments, informing climate services and humanitarian aspects of climate risk management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other ExCom members or observers that would like to make an intervention at this point? All right, I see UNDRR. Making him run here.
Sorry for taking the floor again. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points mentioned earlier. One, Hafiz, thanks a lot. I think the slow onset event discussion and the previous points discussion on slow onset event that we are going to organize, we will ensure that CBD Secretariat or CBD is part of it together with UNCCD. That will be, I think, a good occasion to bring the 3 Rio conventions together as well in context of slow onset events. We did have a good presence at the CBD forum where the post framework was endorsed, and I think that would be a good mechanism to move it forward. And the morning point from the morning session, what Fraude was mentioning about the living document, to put it all together might be a good way to track all of this work as well, so that we have a kind of an internal document so that we see where we are, both in terms of others to see where we are with our activities, but we also need to see what's happening with other similar guidelines and so on. Otherwise, as of now, it's a bit of an assemblage of what we are going to do or we're planning to do, and they have been put together. So a bit of a logic in that planning process would be very helpful for all of us. I missed to mention the last activity on the loss and damage tracking is also being done jointly with WMO. So that's a collaborative effort with WMO and UNDRR, and given their country presence, UNDP is a core partner with us as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Animesh. And it also seems like that would be quite useful to also make sure we're enhancing the synergies across expert groups, as Kaisa mentioned. It does seem like the work of the TAG CRM could be quite useful in future activities related to the national adaptation plans and national planning efforts. Seeing no flags currently, one last thing that I would like to raise is activity 28 in the 5-year rolling work plan, which is to maintain and promote the Fiji Clearinghouse for risk transfer. I think this is an activity that we have not yet touched on, and it may be helpful for the ExCom to reflect on how we would like to take this activity forward, given that it is supposed to start this year, but we have no, I think, currently planned activities. And so if there are views on what's needed to improve the Fiji Clearinghouse, that'd be quite useful to hear, and also to consider how to take this action forward. So if there's any views on that, I welcome them now. And if not, I hope we can have people think about this activity and provide inputs either later in the meeting or offline as well. I see Andrea.
Thank you. I was just wondering if somebody could say a little bit more about your current or planned collaboration with the CBD. I think it really follows with my last question about looking at impacts on biodiversity, endangered species that are integral to indigenous peoples' food systems and cultural practices. And of course, indigenous peoples are quite active at the CBD, as is the International Indian Treaty Council. So I'd just like to hear if we could hear a little bit more about that collaboration that was just mentioned, or is it planned, or is it in motion at this time? Thank you.
And sorry, just to clarify that, Andrea, you're talking about the collaboration that Animesh mentioned from UNDRR. Well, I'll flag for him that question was directed towards him, and I'll turn it over to Kaisa.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor again. And these are only two initial reflections on the question that you just raised on how to communicate more on the Fiji Clearinghouse. I was thinking perhaps it could be something that we showcase during our annual outreach event, as it is our 10-year anniversary. And I think the Fiji Clearinghouse is one our key deliverables during the 10 years. It could be something that we showcase as a part of our anniversary. Another point that I think might be general for also other things that we want to communicate more is perhaps directed towards the Secretariat. Is it possible for us to wish what could be published on social media of the UNFCCC? For example, if we would want the links to the Fiji Clearinghouse being showcased on social media, would that be possible? And in that case, how do we go about to do that? So two initial suggestions on how to take that activity forward.
Thank you, Kaisa, for those suggestions. I I think the first suggestion is quite useful, and maybe we can take it up in our conversation this afternoon on the outreach event and the 10-year commemoration. And I don't know if the Secretariat would like to come in on social media.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Kaisa, for that question. So ExCom does not have its own social media handle, so to say, or the Facebook page. UNFCCC, however, has several social media channels in variety of modalities. Those we would be able to utilize those available social media channels as long as they comply the UNFCCC standard. Thank you.
Kaisa, I hope that's a preliminary answer to your question, and I think we can definitely follow up on that avenue. Animesh, I don't know if you would like to respond to Andrea's question, or if you... Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I would not take a lot of time because the thing is that the CBD 15, the COP CBD 15 did result in the biodiversity, in the new biodiversity framework, which has 23 targets and which replaces the Aichi targets. I think from the purposes of this group, and in particular the tech CRM and other slow onset event expert groups as well, some of the targets which have a interface with the biodiversity losses and the application of ecosystem-based services and nature-based solutions to avert, minimize, and address them are some of the key relevant ones. I think those will fall under target 8 and 11 of the new biodiversity framework. And there is also a component under target 15 of the new biodiversity framework which talks about risk disclosure, including by the private sector, in context of biodiversity losses. Those are some of the key elements which have relevance to loss and damage. And as I mentioned earlier, we would want to unpack a bit further to understand how we can best capture those losses which otherwise are not really captured very well. Just to give an example, under target C and D of the Sendai framework, member states have been given the option to report on ecosystem losses and loss of ecosystem services. Out of 155 countries that are reporting on Sendai framework, not even a single one has reported on these losses. So it goes on to show that we just perhaps don't have the right information in place for the countries to report, and some work might need to be done through the part of this work in slow onset event that we're doing, perhaps might be helpful.
Thank you for that intervention, and I think it's also helpful to hear that you plan to invite the CBD Secretariat or body to participate in the May event, if I understood that correctly. So I'll pause and see if there's any other questions or interventions from the ExCom or observers. In that case, I think we will gain back more time on our calendar. So, Frode, back to you. All right, a late-breaking flag. Jerome.
Thanks, Shara. It's been a very excellent facilitation of the CRM. But just to anticipate some concerns while we are going to operationalize this, I think it's important to link this with the capacity building approaches to make sure that the various tools and methodologies are really absorbed by the targeted users. And it's important really to have a specific platform where to post the how-tos, because these are what will make our efforts transformational. So just a flexible approach how we can dovetail this with capacity building later on. Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much from the two co-chairs, Sarah, to you and the Champions team on comprehensive risk management for having facilitated this and taken us through this agenda item 11. And as you said, we have gained again time. I think we put more than sufficient time for these items, which is fine. Before we now proceed, allow us just to pause for a short while here, and then we will resume in a very short minute with proposal on how we make use of the time, the remaining part of the afternoon. Colleagues, as to how we now proceed, as you recall, before we broke for lunch, we were suggesting two breakout groups, and then we consulted a bit over lunch, and we heard some voices and suggestions as to whether, in fact, it would not be more appropriate to continue in a plenary setting. So we wouldn't like to engage in a long discussion on whether breakout groups are plenary now. But given what we heard from colleagues, that it might be useful for everyone to be able to engage in these two on these two items that are based on our discussion this morning. We feel a little bit that we are in your hands, of course, because I think we could be quite productive in breakout groups, but on the other hand, having heard also the concerns that people cannot be in two breakout groups at the same time, and they are equally important maybe. So we feel maybe we should now propose to proceed in plenary mode. And since we have gained time, the way we could do this is that we could then organize this afternoon from now on in two different plenaries. The one, we return back to the question of further guidance related to technical guides and allocate about an hour for that. An hour, see where we are, and maybe just take a little bit stock there. And then after that, allocate the next hour to continuing our discussion on the 10-year anniversary commemoration. That would take us up to around 5 p.m. this afternoon, after which we could still have an hour for different working modalities among experts and discussing also other issues that we know that are pertinent for us to maybe do today. So that could be a suggestion now, or that is our suggestion, to proceed like that. So I think I'll just put it out there, and if there are no objections to that, that's the way we would suggest we proceed. And I see nodding from some of those that actually during the lunch were suggesting this way forward, not a big surprise, of course. And I see no objections to proceeding like this. So I suggest this is what we do. And therefore, I'm just trying to recall where we left it this morning. And I think we had a good conversation. Where we talked about the way in which on some of these important work streams here, we continue the work on the technical products. We talked about the way in which maybe some sort of timeline or time frame could help inform that process, both on the production plans, if you will, the reviewing process on some of this, and that this could maybe be captured in an overview that could help inform us all. It could also maybe include a bit of information related to dissemination activities. I'm just really trying to look at my notes from this morning, and then I will open the floor, especially also for champions to come in and provide further suggestions as to what additional guidance may be needed on preparing and producing technical guides. And also, of course, from experts, because this is, I think, what it's all about here. It is to make sure that we work along a process which is so well-founded that developing these products, rolling them out, is done in an effective manner and living up to the mandates and purposes for which we're doing this. So with that, I'm opening the floor, and Sierra, please, you're the first.
Thank you, Frode. And thanks for allowing us more time to take this up. And I hope we can be somewhat more informal this afternoon, because I think this is a bit of a kind of working methods discussion. And I think we are probably going to have to produce a couple different things. But one thing I think may be a critical first question is actually the question that Kaisa also posed just now, which is whether there is a different process between what we call technical guides and other ExCom products or knowledge products. And, you know, technical guides came from a COP CMA decision, I believe, that gave us a relatively specific mandate. But we've also seen a need to have other types of products. And right now, I think the technical guide process has been spelled out a little bit more than those other products. And so I think it would be just helpful to clarify if we are using the same process for all of those products, or if there are two separate processes. Personally, I think we should probably just have one process for all of these different types of products. The process that I think Stella suggested of having the two-phase approval of approving like the outline and then approving the final product is what we have in place for the technical guides, and I think it should be the same for these other knowledge products that we produce.
Thank you, Shara. Camilla, please.
Thank you, Frode. And thank you, Sierra. I think that's a very good reflection to start on. There was a lot of interest on this topic this morning, and I think it stems from the fact that we are working on a lot of knowledge products, both through our working groups, but through many of the activities of our work plan. So I think to keep this discussion much more on ways of working, I think there are some things that were mentioned this morning that already set us on the way, and I think we can bring up again to start trying to be much more punctual on them. And start with a request for the Champions Group with the Secretariat to prepare a calendar of this estimate in a one document, perhaps a living document that we can see in just one place. What are the timelines for these products that are coming out of each of the groups, so that we can see when they are estimating their outlines to be ready and when they are estimating the full guides to be ready. And that can help us sort of plan periods of approval, not to, and I heard the comment this morning on, of course, we work with our expert groups and this is voluntary work, and it's not to sort of change their timeline, but rather to ensure that we can understand as well all the other timelines for the full ExCom review. There was a very good proposal by Sierra to have a sort of questionnaire or presentation page for each of the technical guides, where we could have the title, the work stream, the target audience. And I think this would be very helpful to identify whether we want to have, because all of these products come from different expert groups, but they are all product of the WIM ExCom. If we have a minimal outline for all of these that is shared to all the technical guides, or if we have recommendations sort of from technical guides that are much more advanced, perhaps from the Tech CRM and UNDRR, which already has some guides, and sort of what of these guides can be shared throughout them or not. But it will also help us identify, if we have a clear place with all the target audiences, what are going to be the activities for communicating these technical guides, where are we communicating them, when are they coming out, and we can plan activities on that. But also it will help us, we could have that presentation page include questions that would help us both advance in the activities that encourage us to work much more closely in integrating cross-cutting issues like gender and integration of indigenous communities and local communities and indigenous peoples. Sorry. And it is one of the questions that we've had. How are we integrating them into our technical guides and into the knowledge? So then we can know maybe it is not applicable for all of the technical guides, but it is a question that we need to be asking and we need to be promoting, that all of the knowledge that we produce does take into account these cross-cutting issues, and it'll make it so much more easy for us to report, because we have a commitment in one of our activities is that we will report on how we are mainstreaming and integrating. I think that one's specifically to gender, but it does mention later more broadly local communities and indigenous people, and it will help us make sure that if it's not a specific chapter, because perhaps not all the technical guides, we have enough information to have a specific chapter on integrating gender and local communities. At least we are encouraging all of the groups to have that reflection on how we're doing it, and it will help us sort of make sure that we are integrating them in all of them. And so those would be two very action-based, like have a calendar and prepare a joint sort of presentation page for all of the technical guides that then everyone can fill out, and we can sort of compare, and it'll make our job so much more easy when we are sort of validating them or reviewing them. That would be my comment for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla, for being very clear on this, and I think you're putting on the table something that in the conversation going forward, let's make sure that we relate to those two proposals and sort of keep them there in mind, because they are potentially two outcomes of this conversation. We've already circled around some of this earlier this morning. Now we're coming back to this. So not to go totally in circle without sort of narrowing in, is that something that we would like to take away from this discussion, that one outcome of this is some sort of calendar / timeline, a living document that captures the various products and how we are developing them across at least this calendar year, let's put it like that, including also products that have already been developed, but on which there are follow-up actions to be taken that could be reflected in a calendar potentially also, not necessarily by date, 1st October, 12 October, but if not, then October, or even maybe third quarter, if we want to have flexibility. Again, a living document, but maybe a useful tool to capture this from all the work streams. 1, 2, I'm repeating you, Camilla, the other one being the presentation page, as you call it, capturing some of these other sort of principles that relate to how we address some of these cross-cutting issues that you mentioned, and that can provide additional guidance to developing the knowledge product, taking these things into concern. So I'm just capturing this because I think we should see if that's where we are rallying around, and that's where we may also eventually conclude that that is what we want to work on going forward. I have Maud, and I have also, I think maybe it was Angela first, and then Maud, and maybe Diema also with us. So first, Angela, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for the comments. I think the summary that you made, Co-Chair, it's really useful, and I'm totally agree in the sense that we need to have a timeline. As I mentioned before, it's really important to have the whole picture in terms of the work that we need to do from today until, before the conference of the parties and the approval of the technical guidelines. Let me just add additional inputs in terms of this discussion. And I think this discussion is very related to the working modalities or working methods. And I think that is also important. Something that was mentioned by Sierra is to have a clear understanding in terms of how the process of approval of the technical guidelines or the documents that the expert groups develop. And I'm not sure if we have as part of the experience or if we can apply science procedures or if we need to have the approval of all, members here in terms of the outline. If we do not receive, the confirmation from a member of the expert group in terms of the outline, can we continue with the process or not? And I think it's important, to find a way to be efficient, but also to allow the expert members as well as the champions to digest the information, analyze, and provide inputs on time. So I think that science procedure should be considered as part of these methods also, but of course having in mind that it's important to allow the experts and the champions to digest the documents and the information. And also, in terms of the prioritization of technical guidelines or documents or knowledge products, I think sometimes, to me, from my experience, it's difficult to say that perhaps, and I do not have experience or expertise in terms of SOE or in other areas or in other expert groups. To me, it's really difficult to say we need to prioritize this topic instead of this one. And sometimes it's better perhaps to ask the expert members to provide us some guidance according to the best available science and the needs from parties. Because just to be frank with you, sometimes I feel frustrated because I would like to provide inputs, but I don't know how because I do not have the expertise. So in that sense, my suggestion for the working methods is perhaps to consider surveys and surveys for the expert members of the groups, but outside of each expert group, in terms of how to prioritize the topics. When, for instance, in NEOS, we have a list of topics for guidance, but perhaps could be useful to ask other expert members, and as well as in our expert groups, what could be the main topics or what could be the priority for the next months or the next technical guideline, if I can suggest that. And of course, with the idea also to improve synergies and create collaboration between each of the experts, I think that it's important to allow other expert members to provide inputs in terms of how to prioritize the work that we have to do. So in that sense, just to put on the table that perhaps surveys could help us to prioritize the topics of the guidance, and also to add that these surveys could help us to identify in the identification of the target audience. Again, sometimes it's difficult for me to see what could be the target audience for the guideline that is going to be developed by SOE, because I do not have the expertise to provide inputs, and I think other experts perhaps can contribute in terms of the process. Those are the main things that I would like to highlight, and let me finalize my intervention by saying that in terms of the calendar, I wonder if it would be possible, and perhaps for us as ExCom member, to identify, let's say, specific periods of time when we need to approve the outlines or the working documents or final knowledge products, so we can at least have an idea in terms of we can cluster knowledge products, and let's say every 2 months or every 3 months we are going to review that and having the approval. I think the other important thing is not it's to consider we have 2 meetings per year as ExCom member. And perhaps it's going to be difficult to meet, face to face more than 2, and also because the financial resources. So I think it's important also. That's why I suggest to have, a calendar saying every 2 months or every 3 months. I don't know. We will have a virtual meeting just to say we can approve or not the outline document. If it is necessary to have a meeting, or if we can use, email. and saying we can support the document as it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Angela. Just a reflection before moving on. I think maybe we should distinguish between what is generic in terms of cutting across the work stream and what is a little bit more work stream related, if you will. So when it comes to prioritization and target audience, it may have to be a little bit more within the space of each work stream, rather than we may not be able to lift it up on the generic. I'm just speculating here a little bit or brainstorming with you. That's one. The other one is that in terms of, you're absolutely right, of course, with 2 ExCom meetings a year, there's no way that we can just get that business done at those meetings. But I think the principle that we also discussed earlier this morning of having silent procedures attached to these processes, not necessarily with specific dates set, but the principle of having silent procedure so that from the time a certain outline or maybe even a draft, final draft or whatever it may be is out, then we allow ourselves collectively 2 weeks of time for reviewing, and then by then we can move on. So it's not just open-ended, because otherwise we won't get our business done. So that's the general principle I would say around this, that I also was reflected earlier this morning, and I'm sure we can also get that captured somehow in maybe the, I don't know if it belongs to the presentation page or where it belongs, but we can find a way where we can reflect that. So yeah, very useful thoughts and suggestions, Angela. Maud, please.
Thank you very much, and yes, indeed, very interesting discussion. Lots of points to cover. So I have a few points myself. So when we think about additional input for the technical guides, I think it's helpful to go back to the decision from COP25, which was also CMA 2, I think. And so that's where the technical guides were mandated, and there was already a request to include in each of the technical guides 4 sections. So one was on risk assessment, including long-term risk assessment of climate change impact. Other one on approaches to AMA loss and damage associated with the risk referred to in the first paragraph. And then third one on resources available for supporting such approaches. And then the fourth one was monitoring systems for assessing the effectiveness of these approaches. So I think my first point would be to, I don't know, I mean, I'm not 100% sure we definitely considered those 4 points when we came up with the themes for the technical guide, but we should reflect on how we could try to integrate that if we have an outline, a general outline for the technical guides. We should start from the points from the COP25 decision. Also, agree completely about the comment made by Camilla on the importance to have like those cross-cutting issues such as gender, indigenous people in the technical guides. So I hope that's something that the experts can do, and we can try to help them by providing some sort of template. On the calendar thing, I think I'm a bit like on the fence about this, because I'm like careful. I think like it was mentioned by Angela that we don't want to like mandate the expert to do some work, and sometimes because they were kind of like on the side of their desk on this. So I think what was very helpful is to have like the Secretariat provide regular updates on the implementation of the plans of actions and on the 5-year rolling work plan. And so I'm not really sure like why we would need like a separate calendar, because basically our 5-year rolling work plan is already a calendar, and if we update it with like the additional details that we have on, like, for example, like I think for the TFD, they're hoping for an outline in May and then a final product in September. That can just be part of like updates on the status of each of activities in the POAs and 5-year rolling work plan. What I think would be helpful, however, to like have more visibilities for the technical guide would be potentially to have like a specific space for that on the UNFCCC website. I know we have a space for like resources, I think, and key document, but maybe we want to have like a specific space for technical guide for like added visibility, and then when they're endorsed by the ExCom, they could go there. Then on the surveys on how to prioritize topics, I think, I think I agree with your point, Ferdy, that it should be a case by expert group, because like a lot of experts, for example, are working in parallel. So it's not necessarily, I don't know, for the TFD, for example, it's not necessarily the same experts that are working on each. We have 3 technical guides under the TFD, so it's different experts working on different technical guides, so they can work in parallel. We don't necessarily need to like finish one technical guide before we start working on the other one. And then my last reflection is with regard to the audience. I think that's also something that is difficult to identify, because it might be a case by case. Also, for some of the technical guides, they might have like different audience. So I don't know if it's something we would want to go like one by one for each technical guide, but that would be like a lot of work. Or yeah, but I think we should do more brainstorming on that, because that was one of the main points from at least the experts in the task force on displacement, and I think also on the NELS, that was like something that was asked, like who are the who are the users for those technical guides.
Thank you, Maud. I'm just again now thinking that coming back, or allow me to come back to the idea of a presentation page. If that's something we would like to pursue, we might need to consider establishing an intersessional group. Would that be the way forward on that? Because I'm just wondering, how are we following up on some of these thoughts that we are now sharing with each other here? Is it something we could do here on the spot while we are here? If not, I guess we would need someone to work on that. If we are to develop some sort of calendar, I think the Secretariat will be able to help on that if it's a useful instrument, and then that would be subject to input from the various expert groups so that we could compile that. But obviously it should add some value more to what we already have, otherwise it probably wouldn't be needed. Sierra, please. Oh, sorry. Gemma, did Gemma provide comments in the chat, or you are online? Gemma, if you are online, please please come in.
Used, and I think that would be useful to reflect and some of the developing guidance around it. But picking up on what Angela said, obviously it's going to be key that these target audiences, uses of the technical guides are done in conjunction with the real experts in these areas. I also think if we had a clearer idea about the audience, the activity it could be used for, its use, this would help in the prioritization. Obviously, if there's a clear demand for a product, that may be a case for making it more of a high priority than other products that may not yet have an identified demand. So they're just my reflections I was adding to the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. I was struggling a bit with hearing everything, but maybe we did hear you sufficiently. Shara, please.
Thank you, Frode, for letting me come back in. I want to respond to a few comments and then perhaps suggest maybe one way that I'm thinking that this could be summarized, I suppose, and move towards some decision points and taking this discussion forward. Yeah, I think on the prioritization of activities and target audience, I agree that it is sort of a case by case scenario, and I think it is often really critical that the champions for the expert groups are engaging with the experts in those conversations, because as Angela noted, we're often not engaged in the other expert groups deeply or really tracking those conversations. And so I think the champions should take forward kind of working through, what the possibilities are and suggesting target audiences or working with their experts to suggest target audiences. And then in terms of prioritization and also the target audience, I would say, I mean, I think it's sometimes we find ourselves in a difficult position because we inherit plans of actions from other champions or previous experts or from mandates, and we kind of have to reverse engineer. But I think it also is a good reminder and perhaps a suggestion for the intersessional group on working methods that may be considering developing a template for plan of action, that everything in our plan of actions should have, right? Like, they're there for a reason, right? They shouldn't be there because there's no audience and because they're useless activities, right? We went through a process of identifying, no, these are important activities, important enough that we are going to put them into our work plan, into our plan of action. And so I think it's also a good reminder that as we develop the plan of actions, we are going through the process of envisioning, who is this for? Like, is the intent, like, what is the intent? So maybe just a reminder there as well. But I also think, sometimes, so I'll leave it there. And then I also, Frode, I tend to agree with you that I think having a silent procedure process with time, but I also hear Angela's point that it can be difficult to make sure we have time to provide input. I know I'm going to be traveling, for example, something out of like 3 of the next 4 weeks. And so it could be helpful to also allow ExCom members to also ask for extensions when they're in those circumstances, when they're on annual leave or when they're on TDY, and wouldn't have an opportunity to actually review. But perhaps we can ask for them to flag that early rather than on the last day of review, so that we can let expert group know and plan for that eventuality. I also liked Maud's suggestion about having space on the ExCom website, perhaps not just for technical guides, but for other products that we are producing. And maybe it's just like a what's new tab, so that it gets the attention of like, these are the new things we're working on, here are the most recent activities. So those are some reflections to that, but I also, to perhaps go back and summarize, I don't think we need an intersessional group for the outline. I don't know what we're calling it, presentation page. I think we can prepare that here and take it forward without an intersessional group. I have a list here of things that have been mentioned: a title, the work stream and plan of action activity, the lead experts, the intended target audience, the timeline to the final document, if there are proposed related activities or outreach events to take the technical guide forward. And then I think the cross-cutting considerations, how they may have considered local and indigenous knowledge or integrated local and indigenous knowledge, and then how they considered gender, but perhaps those are just calling out two groups, and I don't know if we want to have one question that's more inclusive of, that includes youth or others. So perhaps my colleagues that are stronger champions of those issues can propose language there. I think also it seems like there generally is a good approval, that there is clarity around the process for approval, that it's a two-stage process, that there's an approval of the outline and an approval of the final product. I think Stella mentioned headlines for the outline, but it may be helpful for us to have a brief discussion around what that outline should consist of, and then the review of the final product. So I think that we probably don't need a decision point necessarily related to producing this cover page or presentation page for the expert groups, although I think we should actively communicate it back to the expert groups along with this process. But I do think it would be worth having a decision saying that we considered the process for preparing technical guidance and to have, clarified the process and communicated that to the expert groups, and also that we have a decision on the knowledge products that we are planning to produce this year, and then with those including an indicative time frame for those products, and that could in fact serve as our calendar. So for example, for the activity looking at loss and damage and national adaptation plans before June could be the schedule there. So that would be my suggestion for how we could capture this in decision points and achieve some of the goals of having that calendar.
Thank you, Shara, and thank you for capturing this and giving sort of an idea of sort of an overview of how we can continue our work on this, including also, as you suggest, work on it here and now. Obviously, then still we would probably need some volunteers to sit together and do this work, and then of course if a small group of volunteers are able to do so here, then no need for an intersessional work. We can see how far we can take it, and that should probably something we should agree on now in this session actually, and we do have time for it. Even today at 5 for that matter, but also we have other time slots during the next couple of days to pick that up, and we can see how far we can go. And you had, I thought, Sarah, quite a number of elements that would go into that. So please, if you are one of those that may volunteer in this, bring that with you to that group, and then kick around these ideas and see how it can somehow maybe be reflected. And we can bring it back to a plenary. Now I have Kajsa, please.
And it's been interesting to listen into it. I think the idea that was raised by Maud is really good, to have a part of the WIM ExCom website that is dedicated to technical guides or knowledge products in general, or I think we have a space called resources now, but it's quite limited. One space for knowledge products or technical guides I think would be excellent. To date, we have this page that's called Development of Technical Guides, which I think is quite useful, and it goes through the process and the general principles of developing technical guides. However, I don't think that page is complete. I think the minimum we could do is to update that page also with the points from the decision at COP25 outlining what should be in a technical guide. That's not on the page currently. I think that could be added to that page to provide more clarity to our expert group members that might turn to that page for information. And perhaps we could also on that page list the ongoing technical guides, and perhaps also who is a suitable contact person in case someone that enters the website would want to provide some input or ask questions about it. So I think at a minimum, we should update the current development of technical guides page on the UNFCCC website, but I do think it would be an even better approach to make kind of a broader landing page where we also publicize other knowledge products and the existing knowledge products we have. So that's one point. Then I also think that Angela's comment on having kind of periods for approval using silent procedure, but maybe beforehand having a clear view on when during a year is the different time slots that we take decisions on technical guides. We might not be able to follow that always, but I think that could also be useful to communicate to the experts developing the technical guides, because then they have kind of dates to plan for in a way. So we could, I think it would facilitate work for us as ExCom members as well. So if we could set, a few indicative weeks during different parts of the year where this is a good time to review an outline or a final product of the technical guide, and then everyone could plan after that. And I think that is something that could go be also planned together with our calendar of ExCom meetings and expert group meetings, which we are to produce for this year. Another point on knowledge products, I think Sierra raised it in the beginning of the conversation, and whether or not other knowledge products or technical products should go through the same process as the technical guides when it comes to having first an outline that's approved by the ExCom and then developing the product and then endorsed by ExCom. And I do think that's a good idea. And if we could provide some clarity to expert groups on that, perhaps that would be a good decision point also from this meeting, making that clear that when a technical product is produced, it's first an outline can be sent to ExCom for endorsement, and then the final product can also be sent to ExCom for endorsement. I think that would be quite useful, and especially this outline stage also enables us to see synergies with other products at an early stage, so we can also make sure that we connect that activity or that product with other ongoing work that is relevant for it. I must admit, I didn't really have the capacity to follow the full conversation earlier this morning, as it was 2:00 for me on this kind of process calendar that we're discussing that we would provide to expert groups. But hearing Sierra's suggestion of a decision point on clarifying the process and then creating something that we can communicate to expert groups, I think that sounded good to me. Then I think I would agree with, I can't remember which speaker, perhaps it was you, Maud, that said that perhaps making another calendar with the different deadlines of the technical guides feels a bit duplicative of the work program and the plans of action we have, but perhaps it would be a value in bringing all of the technical guides into the same document, at least in one way, because now they're scattered around during all the different plans of actions and technical and work programs. And then on prioritizing different topics and activities, I do think this is a key challenge, and I really sympathize with Angela speaking on this, because I know you're in the NELS expert groups, and I know I was a part of developing that plan of action, and we put quite a lot of topics on technical guide in that plan of action. Our intent then was not for all of them necessarily to be produced, but those to be suggestions of topics to the ExCom, and then we wanted guidance from the ExCom on which ones to choose. What did the ExCom members find as the most interesting or more the most prioritized work to go forward? And I do think that is something that many experts want out of the ExCom. They don't only want the opinion of the champions, they want opinions of the full ExCom. And in case the full ExCom doesn't have an opinion, I think that's also enlightening, or but I do think it's good that we have opportunities to have the conversation of where expert groups can suggest topics or products, and ExCom can respond whether or not they find them useful or not. And many times the question is from the experts, is this useful for countries? Will anyone use this if we produce it? And that's kind of the input they want from the ExCom. Perhaps there's other ways to get that input as well. So I do agree with, I think it was both Angela and Sierra that said it's of course a case-by-case basis, and it's a dialogue between the champions and the experts, which topics we should go forward with and which activities to prioritize. But I do also still see a value with having the ExCom giving, the full ExCom giving feedback to each expert group. And therefore, I think it's useful we do have those opportunities just during our meetings. And then, sorry for being a bit long, but then to my last point, I just want to highlight that we, in the TFD, we set a deadline already for all our leads of the different technical guides to produce something on paper, ideally an outline, by May. And we did this because we know there's a lot of work going on, but as everyone is kind of looking to each other for inspiration and don't really know how to start, we wanted everyone to get their thoughts into a paper that is more than just activity in our plan of action. And then if everyone circulates whatever they have in May, it might be at completely different stages in the process, but still it's something. Then we can also, they can get inspired by each other, and we can also see where the work is heading, and it's easier to start engaging more when you have something on paper. So we set that deadline for May for them to circulate it to the full task force on displacement. And perhaps it would be useful if other expert groups also considered setting a date in May, or at least setting a date for all the technical guides within their expert groups to facilitate joint work between them, but also seeing synergies and avoid duplication of work, because many of them might be a little bit similar. And then I also want to highlight that our indicative deadline for all the technical guides in the TFD is in September. However, our experts have flagged that this might be hard to have a final product by then, but we did put it there because we knew we were going to have an ExCom meeting that could then approve it. But perhaps if we are to approve it by silent procedure, it will also be more flexible to have that at another point towards the end of the year, or even in the beginning of next year. So perhaps we could think about those kind of common dates that we could communicate to those technical guides that are in that phase. Then, of course, we're going to produce technical guides going forward as well. So not everyone has to be done at the same time, but it might be useful for at least the ones that are being produced now to have a similar timeline to look at each other. And then May is already a date that we have communicated to our experts. So perhaps that would be something to consider for all. I think I will stop there. Sorry for being a bit long.
Thank you, Kajsa. Thank you very much. I think we have quite some common understanding and approach to some of these things, while other things maybe still needs a bit of reflection and discussion, including, say, this calendar, the nature of it, how can it be a useful tool by maybe compiling information that already exists, but at least into one document. Personally, I would find that to be a useful tool, actually. Even as we discuss this, it would be interesting to see what it looks like in one document. And as you said, Kajsa, then we can look across the various work streams and see whether, the various timelines, where are the linkages and so forth, if we have it on one page, so to speak. And that along with the presentation page with the headers here that you also shared with us. So now, since we will try within the next 9 minutes to wrap this up and move to the other item on the 10-year anniversary, I would like for those of you that would like to volunteer to sit together in a small group starting this afternoon at 5. possibly, or otherwise find other time tomorrow to advance this work and bring it back to plenary. It would be great to learn who would sit together in such a group. And may I ask, Sherry, if you are ready to be part of that group, since you offered some good suggestions how to structure some of this?
I am willing to be voluntold.
Thank you. Now, turning to Maud.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, I fully agree with the idea of a small working group, and I think it would be helpful if we try to do like work in parallel. So if we have like people working on like an outline for the technical guides, maybe some other people can advance some of the other group either on the outreach event 10-year anniversary, cooperation with the SBI for Glasgow Dialogue. Or anyway, so maybe we try to like have the champions that are working in parallel. And then I just wanted to add that I think, yeah, the idea that Sarah mentioned, like the presentation page, it's a good start, but I feel like we would need to go a bit further maybe in the outline and provide a bit more details to help the expert develop the technical guide. And I think we need to weave in the sections that are from the COP25 decision. I think that's important. And then I think for the idea that I proposed for using the website, one potential idea to go a bit further, that we could have like an expected date of publication at the, like if we list like all the technical guides that are to be produced this year, maybe we can just add like expected date of publication, and that gives us like an indication of when we can expect them.
Thank you, Maud. I would, just a thought, what you suggested, expected date of publication, I think somehow would maybe belong to the kind of timeline, but obviously also something that could be on the website, so it's not an either or, but the more transparency on this, the better for the benefit of us and for our audiences and those that are accessing the website. Maud, may I ask if you are ready to also be part of this group?
Yeah, I'm happy to be part of this group. I'm also part of the 10-year anniversary, so if we try to not meet at the same time, that works for me.
Indeed, and that is exactly the dilemma we have in working here, parallel or not. But it's to some extent a little bit self-organized basis, but I would like to ask for anyone else wishing to be part of a group to advance the work along the ideas that we have shared now. Angela, please.
I can join Sierra, but with the compromise that we will finalize the job in this session, because, you know, just to be frank with you, I'm in 7 groups of champions, and just I cannot deal with everything when I leave this meeting. So, yeah, that's my only request. Kindly request. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I think that is the ambition, as I also understood you share, rather than actually delegate to a champion group working intersessionally. Anyone else would like to be part of that group? Hafish?
I would like to join with Sarah.
Thank you for that, Hafish. So at least we have 3, maybe 4, subject to how we organize ourselves. If there is maybe one more person, I don't know. Stella, I think you have raised the hand.
By some comments in writing, since I cannot be with you there in person.
I'm also happy to volunteer in this group, and same as Maud, I'm also part of the champions of the 10 years anniversary if we do not do it at the same time.
I think we are good for a start at least. And then let's see, because I'm also hearing that a couple of you would not like to work in parallel, but we have a time slot starting at 5, so the group could probably get started and we could find some other space for following up on the 10-year anniversary commemoration, which we will now very soon start to get back to and see where that takes us. But I think we have a group that could meet at 5 and with the ambition to try to get this work finished over the course of these days here in Manila. So I'm not going to conclude further on this. Maud, please.
Yeah, and this is kind of like open questions to all the ExCom members. Just on the 10-year anniversary, I feel like where we got to on our discussion this morning, like the next steps was kind of like to go back to the champion, for them to advance the work and then get back with something to present to the ExCom, and then the ExCom as a whole could like provide input. So I'm not really sure if it's necessarily helpful to have a plenary session at this moment, but I'm looking at like the other champions to have their input. But I think it would be more helpful to find like a time during this week to continue as a small group, and then maybe we can come back when we have a product.
Sure, Maud, and we will just return to this momentarily, because we are now going to talk about following up on the conversation on the 10-year anniversary commemoration, and then see how far we can advance this over the course of the next That's what I was saying. Okay, please come back.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that instead of going to discuss this in plenary, we should discuss it in the small group of champion.
All right. Angela.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Just one question in terms of our small group on this. Do we have to meet after 5, or because tomorrow we have 2 slots, big slots? So I don't know if it would be possible to use part of the time for discussion tomorrow, or no. I just want to have some clarity in terms of when we are gonna meet, if it is in parallel with another group, or I don't have a strong view in terms of if we meet in parallel, because I think at some point we need to advance. But just thinking in terms of how we will use our time for tomorrow and after 5, or if it is needed or not. Just clarity in terms of the slot. Thank you.
And okay, colleagues. So we are coming up with a suggestion here, but before actually bringing that suggestion forward, and I think the suggestion will include also that the group, potentially groups that we're establishing will be sort of, if you will, members-only groups. Just putting it out right now, that's why I implicitly somehow here. I just wanted to share that with you also for the benefit of observers present here and joining us. That is members-only small working groups that we are establishing here. But I would like to turn to you, Camilla. I have a couple of observers who ask for the floor, but I would like to turn to you, Camilla, with your thinking or your thoughts around whether to advance the work on the 10-year anniversary commemoration is something that we should do in a smaller group, or whether in fact you think it would be useful to spend a bit of time in plenary on that. I think that's the question we just need to clarify, so I'll pass it over to you. Is that for procedure, Shara, or after? Camilla, please.
Thanks, Frode. I was just speaking in the group. I think this morning there had been some comments from observers that maybe wanted to come in on the 10-year anniversary and we didn't have enough time. And I know there have been some proposals kind of made on what the topics of the outreach event could be. So I think we would benefit from having, perhaps we don't need a 1-hour slot time for this, but I think it would be good to have another round to people respond. I think Kaisa made a proposal, and for the champions group to sort of have the general view of the ExCom on what we would like as a group for the topics to be, or a bit more guidance on the art exhibition. And with that, and even if it's just a 20-minute, half an hour, which I think might be enough, we could continue working on the actual written paper that we have, and then use the time to be more productive rather than a plenary setting. So it's yes to both. Just a shorter amount of time, but will be helpful.
Okay. So Camilla, we hear you on this, that it would be beneficial to your work that we just have an opportunity all to sort of feed in with any additional points before you sit down in a smaller group, and also for the benefit of observers maybe to provide that input. And then may I then assume that once you establish the smaller group, is that members only, for members only, or how do you see that group continuing?
Yes, I think it would be more helpful to be members only so that we can have this in writing, and I think there is quite a lot to write on, and then by the end of this week we can already have sort of a much more advanced written document.
Thanks for that, Camilla. So the proposal is, and I have Shara and I have observers having raised their flags. The proposal is that we could soon turn to this topic, Camilla, and spend the 20 minutes or so together here and collect some input for your further work on this. So, but before coming to that, I have first Shara, and then I have observers wishing to make contributions. Shara, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the point of whether the working groups should be open or closed. I'm somewhat agnostic on that question for the technical guides work. It can be more efficient to be in small little groups that huddle. But perhaps we've had quite a rich discussion now amongst ExCom members, and it seems like we have a pretty good way forward. But it would be helpful to hear from expert group members and other observers if if it makes sense to them, particularly our expert group members, if they have reflections, if this seems like it would be helpful in advancing their work.
Indeed, and that may be exactly also why there are flags up. So let's see, Shara. So let's proceed now with inviting observers to come in. And I have 3 or 4? 4? The following 4 observers have asked for the floor, 5. So I have here in the room, I believe, Andrea. Then we will turn to CIEL, then UNIP, then UNDRR, and IOM. So Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. At least a couple of the members had mentioned in the discussion of the development of the technical guides that Indigenous peoples would be reflected in those. And I would like to get more clarity about how that process would happen, or what body or experts or participants you plan to turn to incorporate those perspectives, and exactly how that would take place. Just because Indigenous peoples have sometimes very unique perspectives on these issues. I know when I was a member of the NELS for its first 2 years of development as a facilitative working group member in that role, and now Gunn-Britt is in that role, we had interesting discussions talking about how for Indigenous peoples, for example, loss of food systems and biodiversity related to food systems was both economic and non-economic loss. And how some of those categories, I'm always recalling, for example, the categories that UNESCO set up for something called tangible and then intangible cultural heritage, which is not a real distinction for Indigenous peoples. That doesn't apply to our understanding of cultural heritage. They're not separate. So I just want to see how you plan to incorporate the perspectives or reflect the perspectives of Indigenous peoples. And I've mentioned already to some of you that we hope at the Substa to organize a roundtable or discussion with the Indigenous delegations there, and invite members of the WIM ExCom, as many of you as can come at the given time, to have a dialogue about Indigenous people's specific perspectives on loss and damage overall, that may be a good time to look to see how you can incorporate and get expertise from the grassroots Indigenous perspectives, as well as, of course, from the members of the facilitated working group who would also hopefully participate. So that's a question, basically, is how you plan to go ahead and do that, or what your vision is for incorporating or reflecting the points of view of Indigenous peoples in these technical guides. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. and also for reminding us of your plans for a side event to which you would invite ExCom as subject to you, I believe, sharing with us your ideas on this. I think we would welcome that. And obviously, as you heard, we have already talked about how maybe through some sort of presentation page we can be a little bit more specific on how we do integrate the aspects of indigenous peoples, which already appear in our plans of actions under various items. With this, I turn to CIEL being with us online.
Hello, thank you. And since this is the first time I'm taking the floor, I'll just introduce myself. For those who don't know me, I'm Lien van Damme from Center for International Environmental Law. And also, hi to everyone. It's great to see you again, even though it's from the other side of the world. My comment is actually really very much related to the comment that Andrea just made. I think it's an excellent idea to have this template or this common approach to these technical guides to ensure that some of the more cross-cutting elements are reflected, and to really encourage the expert groups to take these matters into account. And in that sense, I have just very short proposals based on the actual 5-year rolling work plan of the ExCom. So in activity 13, which is about technical guides, there is a proposed approach also to encourage consultation with relevant stakeholders in the planning and drafting of the technical guides. So I think that would already be a very important way to ensure that perspectives of different groups, including indigenous peoples, but also other groups, are reflected. And so maybe that could be something that is also present in this template, or this, I'm not sure what we were calling or what you were calling it before, but this common approach to these technical guides to really have a strong mandate, or in any way include the importance of consultation of stakeholders in the development of the technical guides. So that's one point. And then activity 11, I just wanted to mention there that expert groups are encouraged to mainstream gender and other human rights perspectives in implementing their plan of action, which of course also includes the rights of indigenous peoples. So that's also something that could definitely be brought into this development of the technical guide. So really looking at gender, human rights, indigenous peoples' rights, and how this can be reflected in the technical guide, and how a human rights-based approach can be taken in developing these technical guides, and also how the technical guidance can be, of course, compliant with human rights or human rights based. And then a last point I wanted to make is on the groups, because I think it was Sierra who made a point on maybe it should not only be gender and indigenous peoples. In activity 11, you mentioned gender, youth, indigenous peoples, and local communities, and persons with disabilities. So I think that's already a broader group of actors that could be, or stakeholders that could be reflected in the technical guide. So I would also refer to that activity in the context of these technical guides. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I'm turning to UNEP. UNEP, I guess you're with us online. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for the opportunity. And I was following the conversations and discussion on the technical guides, as well as the range of knowledge products that are being produced. I would like to share some of the key thoughts, but also what I heard. So it does appear that there are knowledge-related challenges in terms of scaling up and supporting loss and damage. First, there is an increasing amount of information technical guides that are being produced by the different expert groups. And the question now is, are they in a format that decision makers can easily access and act upon, particularly links to national policies? The second thing, and an observation, is that some work streams like the non-economic loss and damage, while there has been some progress, it hasn't progressed advanced to fill knowledge gaps. For example, that around biodiversity ecosystem loss, where there is insufficient data in terms of scaling up action and support. And the third, and noting the developments of loss and damage under the Paris Agreement and Convention, the demand for loss and damage knowledge needs and products will only increase. And there's a need to actually link this broadly with the work of the action and support subgroup, as well as the knowledge providers, implementers, and decision makers. UNEP has been working quite closely with the Nairobi Work Program, as well as has followed the stocktake of the Nairobi Work Program, including the joint pledge on Lucky. And based on the stocktake, there are some ideas that could help strengthen the outreach uptake of the knowledge products. Firstly, Kaiser's idea around revamping the web page is a good one, where the website could showcase knowledge products as well as include maybe subpages that are dedicated to different types of resources. And one of the things that came from the Nairobi Work Program, as member states had expressed an interest, is broadening the availability of information, particularly that in UN languages. And there might be a need to actually translate this in different UN languages. Another way is maybe the possibility of partnering with another entity to run the website. And this could further advance the functions of the ExCom and its expert group as a knowledge hub on loss and damage for different stakeholders. The second thing is maybe considering link to the UNFCCC Nairobi Work Program Knowledge to Action Hub, which is operated under the overall guidance of the chair of the SubStar. And this could help enhance the link of knowledge products and technical guides to actual action. Third, under the Nairobi Work Program, when we had developed quite a lot of knowledge products, etc., jointly with other stakeholders, in time we had to think about tracking and measuring the impact of Nairobi Work Program, and particularly the knowledge products. So maybe this is the time right now to think about developing unified methods and metric around the uptake and measurement of the knowledge being produced by the different expert groups. With that, I'd like to end and thank you for inviting us for this intervention.
Thank you very much for your contributions. And now turning to UNDRR.
Thanks, Rode. So very glad to see now the small working group will take it forward. So a few food for thought that the working group might consider. I think one thing which would be very helpful from the point of view of the expert groups will be proactively establishing the demand and need for the knowledge products and the guidance to avoid reverse engineering to different COP decisions. So maybe COP decisions, CMA decisions themselves can be a good basis to proactively inform that these are the domains which might need knowledge products, which might have a knowledge gap, and hence need further guidance so that we know exactly where to fill the gap. We also perhaps would like to look at the ExCom rolling work plan to see if that might need substantive products to inform its implementation. That could also be a good basis for establishing the demand and need. Thirdly, also to keep the country needs in view. What are the needs of the countries on loss and damage? So I would be reminded of the Santiago Network survey that was done in 2020, 2021, where around 24, 25 countries had responded to the survey on what are their gaps on technical assistance. And those gaps could also be converted into knowledge gaps, which might then need expert groups to work further. So essentially, how do we proactively establish demand for knowledge products and guidance? Secondly, I think the suggestion and endorsement process is very clear and logical. I would perhaps also suggest more substantive engagement of the ExCom members in the endorsement process. So perhaps through substantive comments, feedback, as the products are being developed, or as are in the draft stage, so that we can get better ideas and guidance in terms of how to steer it forward and also finalize it. And the endorsement process, the flip side of it will be branding. What is the ExCom branding of the products that are going on the website? We always acknowledge the contribution of the members. For example, the CRA guide that is online on our website and hopefully will be with on the UNFCCC website. The acknowledgement section already has some level of branding, but are we going beyond that? Or are we following the NAP Central way, that where individual brandings are there for every organization, but in a specific format on a specific platform like NAP Central? So that might be another way. Or do we have a very formal process and then it has UNFCCC brand, co-branding with the organization that has developed? So maybe some guidance on branding of post-endorsement might also be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Animesh, for your contribution. IOM, please.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Look, I mean, I think overall the discussion has been quite helpful. I think the direction that the discussion is moving makes sense. Perhaps just to elaborate a little bit on some of the questions that have emerged in the context of the TFD work. One is that, first of all, procedural guidance around length, target audience has been discussed, format and template and so on would certainly be useful, and ideas presented around a presentation page or similar might be helpful for that. Some of the broader questions emerging from the TFD work, though, for example, are around whether to design the technical guides as policy papers. Do we design them as practical handbooks for national loss and damage focal points? Do we design them as research tools and so on? And so I think the point raised, I think, was by Maud in terms of looking at things on a case-by-case basis might be quite important here. So, for example, as part of the work in the TFD to develop a technical guide on integrating human mobility in NAPs and NDCs, IOM is developing a guidance manual which is really intended to provide user-friendly, step-by-step sort of guidance and tools for governments and other stakeholders to do that sort of work and to mainstream migration into different adaptation planning and communication tools like NAPs. But the technical guide on non-economic loss in the context of human mobility, on the other hand, might be a little bit different, and it might be more aimed towards informing WIM members and other stakeholders about that thematic issue. So it would be important, and perhaps this is something that the smaller group can turn its mind to sort of think about, what is important for states, what do they need when it comes to the non-economic losses dimension, what is important to them in terms of integrating human mobility in NAPs and so on, and that sort of broader needs-based.
Thank you, IOM, and thanks to all the interventions by our observers. It's very useful. I'm sure we're taking notes on this as we will advance this work in smaller groups pretty soon. Now, I have two members of the committee, and then we would then turn to the 5-year anniversary and see how we take that forward. But before that, I first have Faisal with us. I believe you are with us online, Faisal, and then I have Angela.
Discussion, since this is the first time I address the floor. I wasn't able to follow the last hour very well, so I just would like to clarify on the mandate of this small group and what is exactly will be provided in that technical guideline after we receive the notes and the recommendations from all members and parties. If the chairs will be able to summarize somehow the way forward for the smaller group, so we ensure that we have a tangible outcome, and then after that that guideline is created, then it comes back to the plenary rooms for the discussion and for all members and other organizations to be part of the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Give you a sort of a very short snapshot of what you are requesting here in a short while, but first, Angela.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. And I just want to react in terms of the comments made by UNEP, very brief, and apologies for taking again the floor, but just to react on the translation of the knowledge products and guidance. And just to say that from my side and as a regional representative from Latin America, I think that could be useful that we as ExCom prioritize somehow the knowledge products that should be translated in another UN languages. I'm saying that because if the users, for instance, is indigenous people, local communities, and civil society, they will never get access in our countries to implement this kind of knowledge products or have the information and use the products. So I think that at some point, I know that the ExCom, we cannot take a final decision in terms of how to translate and put money for translation, but perhaps as ExCom, in our final report for consideration by the Conference of the Parties, is to recommend the translation of some of the knowledge products, because I know that this kind of suggestion has budgetary implications. I'm not sure how's the way to deal with it, but just to say that for us, it's really important to consider as part of our reports some suggestions in terms of translation of some of the products, if we want to have a broad inclusivity and participation in terms of the work that we are doing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I think we just need to make a note of and raise, as you said, as and when appropriate, when there are an opportunity to address budgetary aspects of our work. So yes, indeed. Now, so before we turn to the 5-year anniversary, thanks again for all the various inputs and to you, Faisal. So what we're going to do, the way we're going to work on this is that this small working group that we established will collect these inputs and will work, take this forward with a view to potentially develop a presentation page or some other tool that captures under certain headings the way in which additional guidance can be provided to the work related to technical guidance. So I'm not going to go over everything just now. We have had a discussion on this, and obviously if you're interested in somehow joining, it's maybe a little bit difficult virtually, but we have a small group that will convene and work on this here while we are here in Manila, and then bring it back to plenary. So there's an opportunity, of course, to revisit this in this forum. So that's on that one. And then we would now turn to the 5-year anniversary commemoration, and Camilla, it's over to you. I see an observer raising a flag before we do that. So, okay, please, the floor is yours. I didn't see who was raising the flag.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and I would like to thank you for inviting us as observers to this meeting, and also congratulate the Philippines for hosting this meeting. I'm Andrea Repetti, Minister of the Embassy of Argentina in the Philippines, and my intervention is just to support the previous intervention of Angela Rivera, that said that the importance of translating these documents to have a broad reach to indigenous communities and to local communities and at the national level, because some of the products are lost because they are not translated into Spanish. And as we have a UN resolution on multilingualism, we'd like to support strongly this proposal, knowing that there are budgetary implications, so maybe the language could be recommends to translate the main products of the ExCom into the UN official language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your intervention and for your views on this. So with that, I'm going to turn over to you, Camilla, I think, to take us through this, and let's see how much time we would need to collect the input that you think maybe could be useful in bringing this forward, advancing the work. Over to you, Camilla.
Thank you, Frode, and everyone. I think we can continue the very rich discussion on another topic where there are a lot of inputs. So just to reframe, we have agreed to commemorate the 10-year anniversary, and so far the discussions we had this morning were around 3 main activities or topics, which was one, holding an art competition to culminate in COP28 with a physical space and an event. Second, to hold an annual outreach event that will also follow or be around the topic of this 10-year commemoration. And third, to agree sort of on basic lines of messaging or a basic narrative on the 10-year anniversary that will help us engage throughout the year in the different events that will be held, particularly the regional climate weeks. So after saying that, we had some comments with proposals for topics specific and also proposals on ways forward to organizing this exhibition. So the idea is to have a short but moment of discussion for any of those members or observers that will have recommendations or views or ideas for these topics, so that when later on the champions group huddles to have a finalized document to be approved by the ExCom, or that we can work forward, we make sure that these are taken into account. So that's sort of the context. And I guess with that, the floor is open to anyone that would like to sort of bring up maybe some of the things that were brought up fast in different spaces, but just to make sure that we have them here in one place. Frida?
Thank you. I also wanted to add on that we are thinking about different categories to have the winner for the competition. So we will not have only one winner, we will have different categories. So if you have any ideas for those, also welcome for your comments.
Thanks, Frida. Angela was coming in or not?
No, I wonder if, yeah, I think just to say that the competition is a really good idea. I like it too much, and different types of winners. But I just have a question, because when we talk about a competition, there is always a prize or something. And my question is, are you considering, I don't know, what could be the prize or the incentive to participate in this kind of competition? Because usually we have many things to do at national level, and if we want to engage in this kind of process, usually we look for, like a prize for the competition. And I'm just asking, wondering if you already think about it, or the idea is to provide inputs in terms of the prize.
Frida? Sierra, or who? Okay, then Sierra, then Frida.
I think also following on Angela's question, I know that previously I had asked about like the involvement of the ExCom, and it sounded like there's some upfront work. But I also am just curious about like how the winners will be selected. Your point about like an ExCom pick could be a category, but who else is going to be selecting the winners? So elaborating on that could be interesting. On the point of categories, picking up on a suggestion from Rafiq earlier, perhaps there could be regional winners. And it may also be that some of the categories could be related to criteria for inputs. It may be helpful for us to see how you already are thinking about what the eligibility is, in terms of, is there a category related to like best motivational, like, I don't know, loss and damage, inaction, I don't know. So anyways, that might help us think a little bit more concretely as well.
Frida?
Yeah, maybe I can respond to what will be the award of the winner. And so we thought actually the winning prize would be to have the space of exhibiting your photography in the space over the whole time of the COP. And therefore there will be different categories. So we have different winners and different photographies being at the COP. Maybe you want to add a little bit more on the categories?
Thanks, Frida. Yes, we were thinking more of that price of being there and being showcased in an event. And one of the things we were discussing was also how to sort of ensure the participation of the artists, maybe not physically, you know, we travel you to to the event, but to see how we can make sure that that they are showcased and their work is brought forward, and that to Sierra that this is the space to talk about these categories. So we had been so some of the discussions we had have been on the types of categories. So both for professional and amateur, because of course there are different categories, that we could have specific categories for like within those for students or maybe age brackets, and you could have winners per those categories to promote the participation as well of different points of views. We could have regional ones. I think maybe some of us, this discussion goes forward, some of the decision, it would be just how many winners, and that would have to be a discussion on space. But we are welcoming any recommendations and point of views. I have Kaisa online, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the brainstorming that you have done. I do think this photo competition sounds like a really good idea, and I think it will be a very nice space at the COP as well, and I think that's an excellent prize for the winners. And it also sounds good that you have different type of category of people that submit, so we don't only have one professional photographer that wins, but that it's a chance also for students or youth or similar. I think really good ideas. I have full trust in the champions for taking this work forward. I just want to raise one idea that I also raised in one of our champions calls. I'm not sure if others think it's a good idea, but I just want to put it forward as one suggestion. And it's to create a logo for the WIM ExCom. To date, we don't have a logo, and I think the more knowledge products we create, it would be nice to have a kind of a logo for the WIM ExCom that we could put on our products, and a 10-year anniversary could be the opportunity to develop such a logo and announce it. It doesn't have to be anything super advanced or fancy, but I think something that shows our mark on things would be nice. And I was wondering if that's something that you're considering taking forward.
Thanks, Kaisa. We have UNEP online as well. Alvin?
Thank you, Co-Chair, for the opportunity. Just two thoughts on the 10-year anniversary. With many frontline communities at the center of loss and damage, there are also stories around grief, loss, and also dealing with loss and damage. And this is a very sensitive issue to actually portray in pictures, especially when it comes to vulnerable groups like children. I would like to suggest maybe broaden the focus beyond photographs to actually include maybe recorded videos as well, which will be a more inclusive approach to, let's say, include the frontline communities and also tell their stories and narratives. And this also ties in quite well with how many indigenous and local groups actually tell their stories. The second thing is, in the spirit of the Santiago Network, focusing on technical assistance, there are many many projects, many initiatives around solutions to address loss and damage. And perhaps, in the spirit of the cross-cutting activity of ExCom work plan, maybe the focus could also be broadened to cover these different solutions that would allow communities to showcase how they deal, address, and also local solutions to loss and damage. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alvin. Very good inputs. One of the brainstormed on the names for the competition was the idea of Mosaic of Solutions, because we are thinking of having it centered around the theme of solutions and how the communities and stakeholders are working towards finding solutions for loss and damage. So that is very much in line with a bit of the brainstorming that the group had. I think I have Angela and then Sierra.
Thank you, Camila. And just to react on the comments made, I fully support the suggestion made by UNEP in terms of solutions. I think I was thinking something along those lines. On just a quick reaction on the comment made by Sierra, which is really useful to consider if we need a criteria or not. And just keeping in mind that we have a lot of things to do, perhaps developing a criteria, thinking about criteria for selection is going to be a huge amount of work and additional work. And I've been thinking that perhaps could be useful if it is a competition in terms of photographies or videos, why we don't invite, I think could be useful to invite, not the ExCom, but beyond the ExCom to select the final winner. So my suggestion is, having you like, again, survey or like a questionnaire saying voting for, for the best video or for the best photography, and you will have a deadline to vote, and at the end you just need to announce the winner. But the selection process, we don't need to develop a selection process, and we just invite, the community, means participants, stakeholders, NGOs, all those who been attending the conference of the parties to select. And it's a broad participation and inclusive participation. It's just a suggestion instead of discussing criteria. And of course, I don't have a strong view if it is a video or photography or both of them, or we can, have two categories in terms of the competition. And just on the logo, I fully support the comments made by Kais. I think we need to have, an identity in terms of celebrating or commemorating our 10-year anniversary, and perhaps, we can develop a logo, we can request the Secretariat to develop a logo, or we can invite, stakeholders to provide us, another competition in terms of, a logo, and we can, choose one as ExCom members, and we can, open a space and it could be a good opportunity to engage other actors and to let them know that we will celebrate the anniversary. So we will invite them to participate in terms of this celebration and invite them to develop a proposal for the logo, and we can choose as an ExCom member. Because I do not have, the availability to the time and of course the expertise to design a logo. I'm not good in, painting, but perhaps other colleagues can support us in this process, and it's a good strategy to, to motivate others to engage in the celebration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela. I have Sierra and then Maud.
Yeah, I think Kaisa's suggestion is a great idea to develop a logo, and I think that also gets like Animesh's question about branding. And I think there is value in having a logo and a brand to, what is the difference between products that are endorsed by the ExCom and those that are catalyzed by the ExCom. I think that, having that logo is actually valuable in communicating that. And I think it's a great idea to potentially have that be a competition to crowdsource that input. And I think whoever wins would be quite pleased that they get that recognition. I also just wanted to clarify my point. My idea wasn't around criteria for selecting the winners, but just the eligibility criteria for entering the competition itself. So your point about that you have been focusing on solutions, I think is helpful to know, because I don't think that came out in our previous conversation. And I also really like your idea about having the amateur and professional and the different age groups potentially as well, to encourage youth participation. So great ideas.
Thank you, Sierra. I have Maud and then Rafik.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to start providing some potential answers to the questions that have been asked so far. And so I think the idea was that we would have more than one winner for the competition, because we want to have an exhibition at COP28. So we want to have like a few photographed. So we considered a lot of like art form at the start. We wanted to have like, it was a art competition, and we wanted to have painting and sculptures and videos and digital art. The reason we picked only photograph in the end was that we thought it would be easier to display, because, for example, like transporting like a painting or a sculpture to COP28 is just logistically difficult, and then also the evaluating part would be easy. But we can discuss again like the video. But yeah, our consideration was more around like feasibility and how easy it would be to do. And then, yeah, with regard to categories, yeah, we were thinking about having like potentially like one that would be like popular vote, where it could be like a vote from the loss and damage contact point, for example. We could do outreach there. We could have one that is decided by the ExCom, but it could also be, yeah, with the categories we had thought about like youth or local communities, or yeah, we could have a few categories, and then all of those winners would be displayed at COP28. And then, yeah, we would definitely have like some rules or eligibility for people who enter the competition. Like, for example, like if we have only photographs, we would have like a maximum size for the photograph to make sure that we can print them. So there's like very practical things that we would provide to the people who want to enter the competition.
Thanks, Maud, for also sharing a bit of the thinking behind from the group. I have Rafik and the FWG, or have you taken your flag down? And Frida.
Thank you, Camila. The same line, but before. I think that the Secretariat has launched this kind of competition before. I asked for that. I think that, yeah, check. I think check after. No, not now. Huh? So, in line with what the colleagues said, the category, I think, in my view, 4 category of youth, women, local community, and civil society. So, about awards, it's to be supported to attend the COP28. And I think that not only photo, it will be photo, video, and initiatives and the small project. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafik. Frida?
Sorry. Thank you. I wanted to give one point for the pros and cons that we considered to have a public voting or not. We have not done a decision yet on this, but things that we have to take into consideration definitely is when we have a public voting, it's usually that the most popular person wins and not the best photography. That is one thing, especially if we want to have let's say, local communities participate or youth. And the other thing which would complicate, we would need a website where to put the photographies up or having a process set up. And most likely we would need to have a partnering organization to support us in this process. These are just two additional points. And then to the point of having all the winners participating at the COP, we were also thinking about it, but I think this is a lot of work to be done to just be there for the presentation of the photographies. We were thinking that maybe we could give them a space of a short video of 20, 30 seconds to pass a message on or explain their photography.
Angela, and then Hafish.
Thank you very much, Frida, and I think it's good questions and comments. And just to say, yeah, I'm totally agree with you that perhaps people feel, more comfortable voting for this popular person, but why we can keep this competition, like secret, We will, yeah, but that is the other option. They will submit the photo. We don't need to say who's the proponent or who did it. And at the end, you just have to announce. So it's inclusive but secret. And that is, I think it could be good. And at the end of the day, the proponent just explain the rationale behind the photo or the video. If it is a video, forget it. But if it is a photo, it's going to be more easy. And in terms of the web page, just to say, perhaps the Secretariat can let us know if they can, help us providing this kind of a space to publish the photo. And I think the comment made by Mott, it's really important. We need to have a limited number of participants or a limited deadline for applications, because perhaps we can end with thousands of photographs and videos. So we need to decide if it is a limited period of time or if it is a limited number of participants. But yeah, just to say that, and perhaps the Secretariat can help us if it is a possibility to upload, the photos in the website of the UNFCCC, or if we need to request additional support from an organization, or, the presidency also can support us in this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Hafish, and then UNDRR.
I'm really concerned about Angela and other colleagues' concern about the time, because I do think the champions needs to spend a good amount of time for this sort of organizing photo or a video. But let me try to understand what is the rationale behind this. One idea I got some of my colleagues, that is a video. For me, video, it might be a storytelling related to loss and damage. And youth can be encouraged to prepare just 1 minute or 30 seconds video to tell a story related to loss and damage. And I do agree, it is not so easy to identify the best 10 or 10 videos. But if you think about the rationale, then short video that would tell us a story related to loss and damage, that can be more justified. And if the champions cannot afford enough time, we can also think about external committee to select the best videos, and those can be showed during our 10 years anniversary in our stall. Maybe we're gonna organize a stall something at COP. So yeah, because 5 years work plan, I do recall 5 years celebration, or I do recall ExCom organize a stall. Correct me if I'm wrong. So thank you.
Thank you, Hafish. I have UNDRR and then Larita.
Thanks, Camilla. Just a suggestion building on what I think Rafiq mentioned early in the morning on this topic, that what we're trying to discuss here is a matter of advocacy and communication. And I'm not sure all of us have an expertise, because that's a specialized area of work for advocacy. And I would suggest that if we are talking about something like an outreach, we might need to also complement it with outsource. In the sense, bring our communication experts from our respective countries, offices, organizations, let them brainstorm, like, this is what we intend to achieve through this event. What is your communication expertise say? What is the best way to do it? They do it in and out all the day when this is their core job. So maybe they might come out with some very good ideas, which might help you, all of you, in terms of doing the work, and maybe you can do a bit more of an oversight rather than actually doing it, because I don't think the members may have the required time and capacity, and I see the concerns already being raised on that. I also have a suggestion that perhaps we may bank on the stakeholder groups, in particular children and youth. We bring them in, let them decide what, and bring them in terms of, okay, what is your key suggestion? And we can't imagine how innovative they can be and how creative they can be to come out with some very good ideas on how exactly this could be done. We try that every year at the COPs. We tried that ourselves at the Climate Action Summit in 2019, and the children did a marvelous job in something similar. So maybe we open it, if it's outreach, let's open it. Let's not make it very procedural and formal. Maybe that might highlight, give it a lot of visibility rather than a bit more procedural approach to an outreach event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, UNDRR. Perhaps just to add, as we don't have that much time left on the time slot, this has all been very helpful, and we will take this forward. I would also like to invite you to reflect, I think some of the other points we asked was on the outreach events, since UNDRR pointed out on this idea of outreach, and what the topics for this might be before we close off, so that we continue working as champions. Larita?
Thank you. We moved a little bit past it, but I just still wanted to respond to the suggestion for additional categories, or even wanting videos and photography, to just say that we have to remember that multiple art categories would have different nuances, which means we would have to develop additional criteria. And given the time that we have, I think it's just something to think about so that we don't make things too complicated. And I also am thinking that based on some of the age categories that we want to target, in terms of children and youth, then social media is probably somewhere that we would need to be looking for additional visibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Larita. I have the facilitative working group.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I agree with all the suggestions that had been put on the table. I was supposed to say most of these suggestions, but I would just like to say that we can contribute as FWG on the local communities and indigenous peoples platform on whatever we can contribute to this. But as well as indigenous peoples constituency, we had been managing a pavilion for the past years since Paris. And yeah, as already advised by or suggested by DRR, we always make form a communications team, basically from our youth, younger generation participants. And we also make it more inclusive by inviting the different constituencies, women, youth, farmers, or whatever, to really share or make a space for knowledge sharing on best practices or solutions that they had been doing in response to climate change. As a response to climate change. And if we are going to focus on loss and damage, of course, it will be focused there on those solutions, experiences, solutions, and contributions that each constituency will be sharing in that space. So aside from the competition, the exhibition space, maybe we will have some knowledge sharing space as well. And an area to display all of those products or pieces that had been submitted for the competition. Thank you. That's what.
Thank you, FWG. We have CL online with their hands up. You can come in now.
Thank you. I just want to come in on the outreach event, just to remind and maybe make a proposal about the UN Special Rapporteur on climate change, who was appointed last year. So it's really a recent mandate and a very important one when it comes to loss and damage. So I just wanted to remind people about that and maybe propose to invite the Special Rapporteur to this event to share his views on what's happened in the past 10 years, but also maybe look ahead for the next 10 years or longer on how the ExCom can maybe increase synergies with important UN human rights institutions that have done a lot of work on climate and specifically also on loss and damage. For example, the Special Rapporteur's first report had a focus on loss and damage, and he's currently working on a report on climate displacement, which is of course also very relevant in the context of the work of the ExCom. So I just wanted to bring that in as a proposal for the outreach event. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. I think if we have no more hands up for the moment, this has been very helpful for us at Champions Group to have sort of a general idea on the room with some very good recommendations that I think we can take forward to see how we better achieve a communications output and how we can get help from how can we can integrate experts and how to make sure that it's a feasible output that we can do within the timeline that we have set up for ourselves. But we are very excited because we believe it's a great way to generate discussions and storytelling around how we are facing loss and damage, and that it will help us advance in our work, but also showcase and promote the work that we are doing. So it's going to be an interesting year. I think for us, we can leave it here. For the Champions Group, we will find some space within these next few days to work more closely on this proposal and the next few steps, so that we can send that to the broad ExCom and have it approved as a plan of action. So with that, back to you, co-chairs.
Thank you very much, Camilla. And I trust this was useful for your further work, Camilla, with the champions on this. And as you suggested, I'm sure there will be time space for the group to convene, as there will also be for the other group that we established to take forward the work on further additional guidance related to technical guides. And obviously, but I also heard some suggesting that maybe at this time of the day, it may be a little bit late in the day to start this work, but obviously time is available now. And if not for anything else, then maybe just to actually agree a little bit on the way forward. And I would like to suggest that obviously tomorrow afternoon we have space available for this. And we'll come back and suggest exactly how we can best make use of this time. But please consider also these groups to meet tomorrow afternoon. Another aspect is that we may, again tomorrow on the agenda item 12, we may not use the full 1.5 hours there in the second morning session. So if so, then again there would be potential some time there for the groups to do some work. So I just think keep watching this space and see, and also get together and see if you are ready to commence on some of this work, or you can maybe even delegate a few tasks among yourselves. That's up to the groups to see how best to organize themselves. Because I think we are going now to adjourn for today, break for today, and therefore leaving it in the hands of the two groups to see if they can just at least consult each other and see the way forward, knowing as well as everyone here what opportunities there are tomorrow during the course of the day. The item 7, obviously starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Item 7, the collaboration with the operating entities of the financial mechanism, under which item we will have guests with us to present from the GEF and from the GCF. So with that, I think we're going to leave it there for today. I hope that's fine with you and also for the two groups to see how they can maybe consult each other on this and organize themselves. But we will make sure that there is time, if not only towards the end of the morning, then in the afternoon as well, and then mix between work done in those two groups and then bringing it back to the plenary as appropriate. Sarah, please.
Yeah, I wonder if the group that is working on technical guides may continue to use this space in case Stella would like to participate, given that all the members of the 10-year anniversary group are here in person. It may be helpful just to continue to use this connection to get their feedback and input from Stella and others online that may want to join.
I believe this room is available for you, yes, indeed. And if the other group would like to also use the time right now for 5 or for 30 minutes, whatever, there is another room next door here. And also, not least, there's coffee in the can down at the bottom of the room for those that would need a bit of a refreshment at this time of the day. So yes, Sarah, indeed. So I hear you suggesting maybe that those of you that are in the group just stay here and then you organize yourself. The other group could use the other room for that same purpose. Maud, please.
Yeah, so I think we just need to decide which group we want to work on. Do you want to work on the technical guide, on the little group of the 10-year anniversary, or there's also other groups that could advance work based on those two, the 10-year and the technical guides, there's overlap, so we can't be in two places at the same time.
I might have lost the overview mode of whether there is an overlap, to what extent there is an overlap. I'm aware of those that volunteered to be part of one group, and I'm not sure if any one of you are also among the champions working. There are, okay, well, obviously 2, all right. Then, so yes, indeed, that's part of what we need to figure out there. Now, Frida, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would consider to leave the technical guidance group to be in the 10-year anniversary now, because I see the need that both of these groups will advance, so we have some input for tomorrow, and also hearing the concern from Angela that she would like to finish the technical guidance outcomes of this little working group while we are still here in Manila. So I think it would be important maybe that both groups can meet at the same time.
All right. With that intervention, Frida, and also Maud being flexible here, I think we're good. We can work in parallel on this, and maybe also be a little bit flexible on this. But the idea is, let's make use of the time available here. Let's try to get this work finished, and also please for the groups to consider the decision points that we should take away from this work here in Manila. And we already have quite some suggested language, if you will, Camilla, from your group that could translate into, or in fact maybe be the decision point, I don't know, but it's for you to consider whether the nature of it is too elaborate or you want to compress it into some more general, but again, something for, I believe, the group to consider, as well as also the other group, if there are any points that you think should be captured in a decision. Okay, with that, and not to maybe waste more time for any one of us, thank you very much for today. Another very productive day, and have a good evening to you, and see you in this room tomorrow at 9. Thank you very much. The meeting's adjourned for today.